All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Leah D'Oriel founded Oceanic Global in 2016 with a mission of engaging new audiences in an ocean conversation. The nonprofit taps into universal passions to raise awareness for issues impacting our oceans and to provide individual and industry solutions that drive positive change. Oceanic Global takes a uniquely creative approach to conservation, creating immersive experiences that engage local communities, amplifying the efforts of synergistic groups to generate measurable impact and ignite global action. Since its inception, Leah has spearheaded a series of awareness-driven projects. In 2001, Oceanic Global, with Leah at the helm, launched the Blue Standard, which combats greenwashing, establishes universal accountability for sustainable business leadership, and empowers industries and businesses of all sizes to achieve measurable impact that protects our blue planet. In this podcast, we go over ways that you can decrease plastic use and ultimately decrease microplastics in the ocean, along with recycling do's and don'ts, and some of her favorite ways to keep our planet blue and healthy. Leah, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you. As you know, the Levesque family, we are big ocean lovers. My husband being a surfer, Chris and I both growing up in Southern California and raising our kids here. It is our favorite, quote unquote, park for the boys. Get us in the sand, get us in the ocean. Immediately, we're calm. And so you have founded Oceanic Global, and you founded it in 2016. You are a lover of the ocean. You are a philanthropist, and your nonprofit is here to raise awareness about what's going on in our planet and specifically in our oceans. And it's Earth Week, so no better time to have you on the show, but just thank you so much for donating your time and educating us all on what's going on in the planet.
No, thank you so much for having me. I am a little jealous that you get to wake up on the ocean every day. I'm in London, so sadly a little bit further away, but really, really excited to be having this conversation.
So take me back to the beginning. What inspired you and excited you about raising awareness around the health of our ocean?
Yeah. So maybe just to give a tiny bit of context in terms of who Oceanic Global is, and then I can share a little bit about my personal story in getting here.
Okay.
I started Oceanic 6 years ago, really with the intention of inspiring all of us to care deeply for the ocean and looking at practical solutions to protect it. So essentially, we shed light on humanity's essential relationship to the ocean, and we look at empowering individuals, communities, and industries to create positive change. So how can ocean action start to be incorporated in all levels of society. And the way that we do so is really through three main pillars of action. So the first is working with individuals and communities. So this is more traditional educational experiences around things like plastic pollution, overfishing, etc., but really tapping into shared passions such as art, music, emerging technologies, and looking at engaging more of a millennial and youth audience through this. The second pillar of action is actually working with businesses and industries to be shifting their operating practices. And in 2018, we launched a program called the Blue Standard to help businesses through this transition. And at the same time, look at supporting local policy change. And then the third part is working with institutions and policies. So for example, since 2019, we've been working with the United Nations, and we produce something called World Oceans Day that takes place on June 8th every year. And there's a key theme associated with that. So this year's theme is revitalization, collective action for the ocean. So really looking at bringing a sense of hope into a lot of the doom and gloom that's around the ocean and climate nexus. So I just wanted to kind of just give that pretext in terms of how we approach ocean conservation, because it's so broad and there's so many different organizations speaking about it in different ways.
No, I love that you've drilled down into like the people in the communities, the big players like the industry, and then making some policy changes through institutions. So I love that. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, we're at a point right now where everything needs to change. And if we can start really just making sure that, life is at the center of all these decisions, that's really when things will kind of shift the right way, I personally believe. So, yeah.
So how did you personally get into this?
Yeah. So, I was 25 years old at the time, 2016, had a little mini burnout. I think I was really working in an industry in the event space, which really didn't align with my values. And I was on my 2 weeks a year off holiday, sitting on a beach in Ibiza in Spain. And I read an article that said we had 10 years before human impact on the oceans was completely irreversible. And I remember reading that and not really being able to comprehend what that meant. And then my next thought was, wow, how is this not on the front of every single newspaper? For me, the oceans has always been my happy place. I was born and grew up in Hong Kong, which is surrounded by oceans. It's 70% national park. I know there's a contradiction with most people's idea of a big city life. But growing up in Hong Kong, I also saw the human impact that we had on the environment. So there were days, for example, growing up where the ocean was too polluted, where I couldn't go in because of the Red Seas. Or my brother, who was asthmatic, couldn't go outside and play sport because of the air pollution. And so reading that, I felt really sad, actually. And I realized that if my generation weren't involved in this conversation, how could I expect anything to really change? And I remember going home that evening and drawing out Oceanic Ibiza, which was the first event as part of Oceanic Global. And then it really spiraled from that. So it started off as a passion project. I had no idea what I was in for when I kind of brainstormed that all out.
It's really interesting to see people's paths and how they influence their career shifts. It sounds like you were in events, and so it made the most sense to have an event around the ocean in Ibiza. Yeah. So you kind of parlayed your career experience with something you were comfortable into something you were passionate about. So that first event, like what were you just trying to raise awareness with that first pillar of community, or what was the event and what were you teaching people?
So for me, so for a bit of background, part of my family moved to Ibiza in the 60s. So I spent every summer there. And, it really was this very pristine ecosystem. So when I was reading this article at the time, Ibiza's really now mostly known, I would say, for the music industry. And there's a big kind of like hospitality and tourism tide. But with that, we really started to see the impacts of things like plastic pollution on the island and specifically with marine life. So the idea with Oceanic Ibiza was to bring people together by tapping into art and music, and really create a multi-generational event where you also had, 30 speakers from around the world, 25 different nonprofits within the ocean space that were showcasing how they were addressing these issues, looking at bringing in different facts with different performances. So just really kind of using these universal passions to thus educate people around this. And actually, we did a year of work leading up to this event, where we partnered up with local businesses on the island to help them eliminate single-use plastics, which is later where the Blue Standard came from. We worked with local schools to be educating kids around the impact of single-use plastics. One of the schools that we worked with actually there decided to go single-use plastic free, which was amazing, a year and a half later. And actually, Ibiza pledged to eliminate single-use plastics by 2023, as well as put a fine of 10,000 euros on anyone that dropped their anchors on the Posidonia, which is the seagrass there, which keeps the clarity of the water. And we really realized by bringing people from all different backgrounds together, really involving the media and these different levels of stakeholders, that you can actually have these long-term policy shifts. And then we realized we needed a roadmap to help a place like Ibiza actually implement this. So that's where it went from really, creating an event to creating an organization.
Wow. So that first event was really bringing in the major players of in the nonprofit space around the health of the ocean. And I'm sure tapping them and learning from them to find out what the biggest problems were. Can you talk to me about single-use plastics? I mean, I've seen art installations in Malibu where people have created sculptures out of plastic straws and single-use plastics and trying to reuse those. But can we talk a little bit about plastics and the environment and microplastics in our ocean and even showing up in our bodies?
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like everyone is like, okay, we know about plastics now. People have been speaking about plastic straws for the last few years. But I actually feel it isn't covered enough because still year after year, we're creating more plastic than ever before. So I think that's first something to understand is, yes, we're all aware that we need to be reducing our single-use plastics, but that still needs to transition into action there just because of the sheer quantity of plastics being produced. And
so the stats are still going up, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's crazy.
With all the awareness, we're not flattening this curve. It's still going
up. We live in an extremely interconnected world. So ultimately, it's not just impacting the ocean environment; it's also impacting our human health. So the way that we try and speak about the impact of single-use plastics is, yes, the impact on the environment, but also how is this impacting our bodies too. So, for example, I think that most people now realize that, or maybe they don't, but over 84% of our drinking water worldwide has traces of microplastics in. So we're drinking this every day. In the States, it's closer to 94%. Our bodies are not actually able to get rid of these microplastics. So as a result, the science is just coming out in terms of what those long-term health implications of that are, but we know that on average, we're digesting right now 1 credit card of plastic per week too. So you're talking about water, all salt around the world is now contaminated with microplastics, or beer around the world is contaminated with microplastics. So we're taking this in. The WOA, which is the World Ocean Assessment that came out last year, which is a collaboration with over 760 scientists, didn't study so much the impact of microplastics, but they really honed in actually on nanoplastics. And nanoplastics are even smaller pieces of plastics than microplastics. And the really scary thing here is that they can actually enter our bloodstream. And when they enter our bloodstream, it can change. So these chemicals are attracting they're attracting themselves within our bodies, and we're changing these compounds, which to me is extremely scary. When we don't really know what these long-term health implications are going to be. So if you look at the human health, but then you also look at what does this mean on a place like the oceans? This means that anytime, for example, anytime you litter plastics, there's a chance that it's going to degrade and turn into microplastics, essentially working its way up the food chain. So making its way into the ocean, When it's in the ocean, it doesn't break down in a typical way. It actually breaks down more like a soup that is then digested by things as small as plankton, works up its way up the food chain, ends up on, potentially a fish that you're having for dinner. And then it's kind of that whole cycle there. One of the things also that came out in the WOWO, which I think most people aren't aware of, is the impact of pharmaceutical drugs also and personal care products. And for example, that anything that you're putting on your skin is essentially washing down, going down the drain into the ocean, and thus finding its way through this cycle too. So we're not just, bringing in microplastics into our bodies, but also lots of different types of chemicals here too. And these are also maintained properties within seawater.
Oh my gosh. I'm still back at consuming a credit card per week. I mean, that is just, it's really horrific. And I mean, I talk a lot about clean beauty and simple beauty, like using a pure oil on your skin versus a lotion, and trying to simplify with Castile oil-based soaps like a Dr. Bronner's. In the shower, like I'm a total minimalist when it comes to beauty care, and really try to support brands that are lowering plastic use. But it is heartbreaking to think about the empty water bottle that you see on the beach ending up in our oceans, working its way onto our plate through our salmon and ending up in our bodies. Can you talk about ways to decrease single plastic use? I mean, because we're all saying like, okay, stop using plastic. I'm sitting here with my stainless steel Yeti. It's full of my water. I try to take it everywhere. But how can we really make change?
Yeah. So when friends of mine ask me this, I actually recommend that it's a very similar process that I recommend to what we do when we work with industries. So the first thing I say to people is go and audit your home. Look at what are you purchasing? What is it being packaged in? Look at how much plastic you're interacting with every single day, and kind of gamify it. See, it's hard to go zero waste overnight. And I think that we need to kind of look at what are these kind of like easy, low hanging fruit and baby steps that we can all be taking. So for example, I recently moved to the UK from New York. And when I first got here, I was shopping at the local supermarkets. And I was so upset by anytime I went to get, a pepper, onions, whatever it is, it came wrapped in plastic. And I actually went and found a box that worked with local farmers, and they have completely reusable packaging. And every week on a Monday, they bring me this box with local produce from a local farm, and I give back all the packaging from the previous week. And there's a fully circular economy there. And the more and more I've looked into it, is we're seeing a lot more of these types of models out there. So the first thing is go audit your house, see what you're currently using. Are there simple things that you could be investing in? Are you going out and, drinking 2 coffees a day and going to a coffee shop? Can you invest in a reusable coffee cup as kind of like that first action item there for week 1? You mentioned bottles, etc. So that's the first. I think also beyond food, there's also a lot of hidden plastic. So for example, clothes are one that I think people don't really speak about. But the truth is 60% of our clothes are made from plastic derivative fibers like polyester, like nylon, spandex. So being really careful about the clothes that you're purchasing and every time you're washing them, being aware, for example, of potential microplastic shedding and how that can also contribute to it.
Wow, I didn't even think about, I knew there were plastics in clothes. It's very popular to have shapewear nowadays and stretchy jeans, and we know that that's plastic, but I hadn't even thought about it shedding in our washers. So when it comes to caring for these products, if someone's not going to give up the stretch in their jean, is it a cold wash? Does that make a difference? Are there like practices in the home outside of for caring for plastic that supports it?
Yeah, so there's two bandage solutions, let's say. one of them is called guppy bags, and they're essentially washing bags that you can put your clothes in, and they will catch the fibers and the plastic fibers, and it will really be like fluff, and you'll be able to pull that out and then dispose of that in your trash. So that goes to landfill and that doesn't enter the water systems. Okay. And then the other one is called a coreable. So that's another thing that you add that in with your laundry, and it will catch all the fibers. And if you want to go a step further, you can actually install something called a Planet Care filter on your washing machine. So this is essentially an added layer which will capture microfibers.
Wow. There's so much we can do. So, I love that you're just sharing things where you can meet people where they are, because some people listening to this, it reminds me of when Tom's was the only like green toothpaste back in the day. And now looking at Tom's and comparing it to something like Risewell or David's or Wellness, you're like, wow, it can even be cleaner than Tom's. But when no one was using Tom's toothpaste and people started using it, you're like, that's weird. Why are they using that toothpaste? Like the transition can be difficult. So these replacement and sort of baby steps or supportive steps, like do what you can with what's available to start to be aware and have it be top of mind that we're trying to support the environment. Okay. So now I have to we got to go back. If we have the guppy bags and the corgles and the full mesh insert for a washing machine to catch microplastics, what about the microplastics in our drinking water? If 94% of the US drinking water is full of microplastics, do things like reverse osmosis filters, charcoal filters, do they stop microplastics or nanoplastics? Or are they still present in our water?
So honestly, we don't have enough data on that right now. There are certain filters that will pick up more microplastics than others, as well as things like heavy metals. So depending on where you are located, you should actually look at what you need to be filtering out specifically from a water source standpoint. But from the top of my head, I'm not able to make those recommendations.
Okay, that's cool. So let's talk about other places where we have and use plastic. So we have the single-use water bottles. We have our coffee cups. It's in our clothes. You talked about chemicals being present in our skincare that's ending up down the drain and in the ocean with the animals. Are there any other low-hanging fruit changes that we can start to make in our home to lower our single-use plastic or support industries to make change?
Yeah. I think packaging is a huge one. 40% of single-use plastic is actually consumed directly due to packaging needs. So really looking at how your food or how anything that you're purchasing is being packaged, and are there sustainable alternatives there? I know you mentioned beauty, for example. So, do your favorite beauty brands have refill programs instead? We're seeing a lot of innovation coming out. So, for example, could you be moving to a shampoo bar instead of even, a single-use bottle, etc.? So just kind of rethinking all these systems too, and seeing what other alternatives are there out there. Definitely.
I always think about how can I do this in bulk too, to try and use less, but that's a great alternative. Now, what exactly is happening on an ocean level, an ocean health level with single-use plastics? Is there research and science showing us the degradation of these ecosystems, or what's happening with our animals?
I try not to be too,
doom and gloom
when we're talking about this, because it is. Essentially, essentially, plastic pollution is one of the many issues within the ocean space. But I would say one of the main things that you could visibly see come out of it is things like dead zones, which are much more prevalent. So dead zones are essentially areas of the ocean which carry no more oxygen, because everything within that area is now dead. And it's too toxic for humans, animals, etc., to be interacting with this. So typically a dead zone, for example, you'll see like floating, dead, puffed up fish within these areas, etc. And these are becoming more and more prevalent. So that's just one example that's visible to the human eye in terms of what those impacts are of single-use plastics on the ocean. But most of the true impact actually happens below the surface. And in terms of what that means beyond animals being entangled, which is another huge one, to, we see images all the time of dead whales washing up, pounds of, I'm losing my train of thought. Sorry, but dead whales washing up, seabirds, over 1 million seabirds die a year because they're tangled in fishing nets predominantly. All of this is very, very real. And I think one of the elements too that what people don't realize when we're talking about single-use plastics is actually the impact of ghost nets, which are essentially leftover fishing gear that makes up the majority of single-use plastics in the ocean too.
Wow. So is there any innovation for fishing nets that, like, is there hope there for new ways of catching fish or to prevent all this single-use?
Fishing is a whole other category in itself, but in terms of the nets itself, I think it's moving away from more harmful fishing practices. So moving away things like from bottom trawling, for example, which is when they throw huge nets down, which kind of take everything down from the sea floor. And there's a lot of bycatch that takes place at the same time, just because of the amount of species that are be captured at the same time within these nets. So moving away from that into much more targeted ways of fishing. But, I think when we start to look at the fishing industry as a whole, I don't know if it's something you want to dive into here, but it's plastics and nets are just one tiny component of that puzzle.
Yeah. I mean, well, I love the health benefits of eating fish and I want my children to eat fish. I'm wondering, starting this organization, what types of fish you eat, if any. How do you source sustainable fish? What does that mean? I know you're really well versed in greenwashing, and I think there are so many certificates on the side of things and associations and organizations giving these, whether it's a fisherman or a company, some type of award or certification. Like, are those real? Can we talk about how you source fish?
Yeah. So the day I started Oceanic, I gave up all seafood. So that's been my personal choice and journey in this. But that's not what I recommend to everyone. What I recommend to everyone is reducing their seafood intake. So it isn't something that, it's not part of your everyday meal. But in general, to kind of take a step back, there is no definition of sustainable or responsible seafood. So with that, navigating this space is extremely confusing. Over 3 billion people rely on seafood as their main source of protein. So it's definitely a huge need. But there's a big lack of transparency within the space. So over 30% of, fishing is actually illegal, unreported or unregulated. And 40% of fish sold globally is mislabeled. In certain places around the world, that's a lot higher. In New York City, for example, they did a study 2 years ago when 94% of fish sold in New York under the name tuna were actually completely different types of fish.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So, a lot of the time when people go to their local supermarkets, you think you may be picking up a tuna or a different type of seafood. And the reality of it is that there may be traces of shark in there. There was a study on pet food finding that there was in 20% of pet food across the US, traces of shark are found when they're marketed as a seafood-based protein. So mislabeling is a big, big component of consuming seafood.
I mean, pure transparency with you. I love learning this, and I'm interested in learning this, and I wanna do right by the earth, but the health benefits of those long chain omega-3s, the brain and cognitive benefits, even down to the mineral content of seafood. The nutrient density is unmatched in comparison to specific plant-based foods that you would be trying to replace. So, and most of the supplements are based from all of these supplements are from the ocean, unless they're claiming to be omega-3, but they're actually plant-based short chain omega-3s. So I need to know from you, like, what you just recommended, how do I source tuna that isn't shark? And are there brands or companies that are in alignment or, really taking into account all of these amazing nonprofits that you work with that we could be supporting?
So first tip I would say is go and choose local and seasonal seafood that's well managed. So get to know the species that are native within your area at the different times of year. That can be the most sustainable thing that you do. Getting to know your fisherman, speaking to him about how is your seafood actually caught. That's one of the easiest ways to make sure that, one, you're not contributing to, anything along illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, that you're eating the right types of seafood, that your seafood also has less bycatch associated with it, so less waste through that process. So that would be the first kind of 2 tips there. And as a general rule, also choosing smaller fish that are lower down on the food chain reduces the pressure on keystone species, which are top predators. So if you are going to be going out there and, consuming fish, those are things to keep in mind. If you're eating
sardines,
there you go.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about greenwashing then. How do we avoid that, and what should we look out for?
So, greenwashing is a little bit like the whole seafood industry, I would say, as a whole. I think there's a lot of pressure right now on brands to be having some sort of corporate social responsibility program and initiative. And as a consequence of that, we're seeing words like ethical and green and sustainable and eco-friendly being plastered everywhere with really very little roadmap on how they're achieving this. Any brands, as a general rule, that have these words out there that actually don't explain the types of actions that they're doing on their website, I would just automatically put into the greenwashing category. I find that the majority that are doing it the right way will actually take the time to explain on a sustainability page on their website how they're doing so. As a general rule, looking at specifically on the product and packaging side, is there a full life cycle analysis that a brand has taken into consideration? So for example, does a brand have a give back component? Are they looking at the materials that they're sourcing, the end of life of this product? These are all ways to make sure that a brand is mitigating greenwashing and really taking meaningful action through it. And then also looking at third-party verifications. That's a great way to make sure that someone else has gone in there and audited the work that brand is doing.
What are some of your favorite third-party organizations that are certifying brands?
Actually, through the Blue Standard, we launched a Blue product and packaging seal to make sure that we're mitigating around greenwashing, specifically in the plastic space, because we're seeing a lot of things like bioplastics and compostable plastics come up. But the truth is, for home composting, that isn't readily available. So we'll automatically put that within the greenwashing space. And then in terms of more the cosmetic beauty side, one of my favorite verification platforms out there is called Made Safe. So they actually go in and they look at, every single compound and material that is within a specific product, and really kind of take that holistic view on verification.
I love it. Details are so good when it comes to this stuff. It's interesting because I feel like it is really difficult. And you just mentioned compostable products. Even just in my line of products, one of my packaging people were like, you could use this compostable bag. And I'm like, great, send me the sample. And I looked at it and I was like, there's plastic inside of this compostable bag. Like, no one is going to be able to remove the inside. And they're like, yeah, it's 80% compostable. So you can say it's compostable. And like, if it's 80% compostable, So newsflash, like no one at home is going to be able to compost this. Like, how do they separate the plastic from the compost?
Yeah.
You know?
And most items that say, most items that look like single-use plastics are normally industrially compostable only, which means that cannot go in, home composting. Most states actually don't have the infrastructure for industrial composting available for home pickups. So if you're going to be putting that in your recycling bin, you're ensuring that that's going to go to landfill, because the minute that arrives at the recycling facility, it will actually contaminate that whole waste stream. So it will already be thrown out and separated.
Oh my goodness. So now we have to go into recycling do's and don'ts, because even yesterday I was at the Science Discovery Center with my son, Sebastian, and they had a recycling, little play conveyor belt, and you had to pull plastics and compost and paper goods. And, he's 3.5. And it was a game, and you're throwing it in their fake trash can, and it's dinging and everyone's excited. But I think recycling is so confusing unless it's a aluminum can or a plastic bottle or a glass bottle. I'm like, if there was food on this and it's sort of paper, is it recyclable or is it covered in, marinara? Is that allowed? Like, can you go through the recycling do's and don'ts for us so that everyone listening can have an idea of what they should be recycling so they're not putting plastic in the ocean?
Yeah, no, of course. So every plastic item actually has a number from 1 to 7 on the bottom of it. And typically the numbers 1, 2, and 5 are most commonly accepted. So as a general rule, look at the numbers 1, 2, and 5, put in your recycling bin. And those are typically rigid plastics like bottles, containers, etc. And the thing, though, to mention there is anything that you are putting in your recycling bin, you do need to wash out, because otherwise it's considered contamination. And if there's any food residue on that and it arrives at the recycling facility, again, that will go straight to landfill. So I think it's our responsibility too, as consumers, to know how to properly recycle, and making just sure that whatever we're putting in the recycling bin will ensure that it will actually end up in the right place. Yeah. And, a crazy stat here is only 9% of recycled items are recycled every single year. So there's a huge opportunity for improvement here. Yeah.
That is the lowest hanging fruit from this entire podcast.
Exactly.
Plastic 1, 2, and 5, rinse it out completely and put it in your recycling bin. And if anything has food residue or you are unsure, throw it away.
Throw it away.
Well, what else?
So basically what I would first do is see what does your local recycling facility take? So every state will actually have different rules here based on how your recycling facility is set up, a little bit like composting rules. So just first learning the language of what is available to you and what that infrastructure is.
Is there a main database for that we can link to, or is it...
Yes, I can send you the resources, and maybe we can put it in the footnotes here.
Okay, great.
Perfect. So that would be the first one. And then there's actually a lot of don'ts to put in here. So anything that's flexible plastics, like thin cling film packaging, wrappers, etc., automatically are not able to be recycled. Anything that is wet, so even things like paper and cardboard that have too much oil or are damp, etc., cannot be recycled as a general rule. And then one which really kind of scared me living in New York, where people live on takeout, is typically black plastic containers aren't recycled because the recycling machines don't pick it up. So again, that should go in your landfill trash bin.
Well, there's something that we can all do. If you're taking out somewhere in your local area and they're using black plastic containers, get with them to make the swap, because I feel like that's another piece of low-hanging fruit where we can go be an activist.
100%. Yeah.
Okay. So dry paper and cardboard products only. Look for the recycling numbers 1, 2, and 5. Rinse them completely. Do they need to be dried before they're thrown in if they're plastic, or...
I would dry it out on your rack like you would for any of your washing up before putting it away, and then put it in your recycling bin.
Okay, great. And, I'm kind of curious because Chris and I are both in the kitchen throwing things away. from starting to follow these rules, and say, for example, he throws in a bottle that has like some residue and it gets on other things, is that whole bag a wash, or do you think that there would be some, I just don't want to be part of the only 9% being recycled. How stringent are these rules?
It really depends on the location, honestly, and the pickup. And I think what goes, what spills there. If it's ketchup, probably that whole bag will go to landfill. But if it's a little bit of, I don't know, leftover coffee, it should be fine. Yeah, or water.
Okay.
Actually, coffee cups is another one that I think most people don't realize, but they're actually lined with plastic within a paper coffee cup to kind of hold that structure. Again, meaning that can't be recycled, because anytime two different materials are compounded together, that means that a traditional recycling facility won't take it.
Is there anything that coffee shops can do to get away? I mean, are there pure paper cups without that plastic lining? Because I think about avoiding that plastic lining for health purposes as much as I can. And, I am absolutely not perfect. There are days when I am out dropping the kids off, have a meeting with a client. I'm like, Mama needs a coffee. And so I'm feeling motivated from this call to keep my reusable coffee cup in my car. But and the off chance that someone goes to a coffee shop, is it something like the black plastic where we can tell our coffee shop to switch to something else? Are there options without plastic?
There are not options right now that can hold hot coffee equivalents. So what I would recommend is actually maybe take 5-10 minutes, use that as a time to ground, and try and have your coffee at the coffee shop in a reusable cup and ask them to,
Oh yeah, that's great.
So just kind of like
obviously on the go a lot.
To go
geez, that's embarrassing. Okay. Yes, they probably do offer ceramic cups that I could sit and actually drink my coffee at the coffee shop. Smart. Okay. So water, we're using a reusable water bottle. We don't know if there are any we don't know the filters that remove nano or microplastics at this time. For your washing machines, we're going to link the products that you mentioned to remove plastics from getting into our water stream. Our water supply and eventually our ocean, which then means in our fish, which means in our bodies again. Mm-hmm. And then we have some recycling rules. And you mentioned Made Safe as a great place to look for beauty care products. Do you have any more resources around home care, whether it's like cleaning, beauty, or anything we should be looking for to lower our plastic use? Or are there any brands that you think are doing an amazing job of really lowering their single-use plastics?
Yeah, so as a platform, I actually recommend Package Free. So you can go to their website and they actually recommend all different types of alternatives to more harmful single-use plastic options. So great resource for anyone that's like, I'm looking for sustainable toothpaste, to hairbrushes, to hair ties, to food items, etc. In terms of the actual, are you talking about like recommendations for beauty?
For anything in the home that I just want to know from your standpoint, you obviously became so passionate about this that you completely cut seafood out of your diet, which I'd have to be really passionate. And I love the ocean. Like I don't need to go on vacation. Like I feel really lucky to have been born in Southern California. And I always say, if I was born in if I wasn't born here, I probably wouldn't be here. It's it's a grind of life to have to or try to afford living here and being here. But it's in my blood. It really is just who I am and who Chris, there's nothing like it. And I'm sure you feel that when you're in Ibiza. And, and so I think it's just, I want to do everything I can and amplify your voice and what you're doing. I don't know. I lost my train of thought, but I want to do what I can as much as I can. And I don't want people listening to this podcast to go the way that I feel I'm never going to cut out seafood, but what can I actually do? Or who can I talk to? What companies are doing it right? So I'm curious in your standpoint. I mean, you cut out seafood completely and people might not be at that stage, but what else are you adamantly against, and what other practices are you, implementing in your home and your lifestyle that are making a big difference?
So beyond my food choices, I would say one of the first things that I did was actually go through that process of auditing my house. So one of the things that I found quite hard to switch over was actually like refillable shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. One of my favorite companies out there is called Plain Products. And so every month they would send me a reusable the reusable bottles there with the products inside. I would send back the previous ones, etc. Made me feel great. So definitely check out Plain Products. They're actually blue verified. So we just made sure that there is no single-use plastics across any of their products there. Raw Elements being another one. So sunscreen. Raw Elements do aluminium-based packaging. With again. Yeah, they're great. Neil's Yard, I don't know if you're familiar with them, but they are a beauty brand. They've, never used any plastic microbeads in any of their products since fruition. None of their actual packaging have any plastics within it. Ren Skincare is another one, so they're fully zero waste brand. There's the good news here is I feel like over the last few years, we're starting to see a lot of innovation within this space, and it is actually a lot easier to become more sustainable. So those are just a few of my favorites.
I appreciate all of your recommendations, and I'll link to everyone you just mentioned. I'm curious in regards to glass versus aluminum versus, we know the plastics, but say, for example, like in our home, Chris loves to bring in Sound sparkling tea and Spindrift, like sparkling water. And we do buy a couple glass bottles when we grocery shop of either Mountain Valley or Pellegrino, or, kind of like a spring sparkling water. Is there a hierarchy of like what's best for the environment when it comes to glass, aluminum, plastic, paper?
Yeah.
Recycled paper, like.
So, in general, I would say it depends on, again, like what the use case for this is. The great news is glass and aluminium, infinitely recyclable. So you just know from that perspective that there's such high value associated with it that it's in the recycling facility's best interest to make sure that these products will have a second life. So that's kind of like a check mark there on the guilt factor.
Okay, good.
In terms of paper products, there's a lot of opportunity to do better. So for example, all my, or toilet paper, for example, paper towels, etc., making sure that they're unbleached, recycled, if possible. These are just like very easy switchovers that we can also make sure that within these categories, they're also as sustainable as possible.
How do you feel about bamboo products?
I think it depends on specifically for what. I haven't looked into it enough, for example, in the fashion industry, but I am quite pro bamboo for an alternative to paper, just because of their low water usage in general, and they grow really quickly, so they're pretty amazing.
Right? Yeah. No, we switched over our paper towels and toilet paper to bamboo just based on its sustainability, but greenwashing is everywhere, so I want to make sure you don't want to rely on the brands. That sort of feels like what our parents' generation did, was watch the commercials, see the ads in magazines, and go, oh, well, then I'm following that.
It must be.
More than ever, I think our generation is really skeptical, and we want like radical transparency. But the sustainability piece is so nuanced that it's hard to keep up. So,
as a general tip, though, I'd say ask yourself, is this too good to be true? Like the reality of it is most sustainable products are not supposed to be very complicated. If you look at, the options that we've been talking about are glass, aluminium, paper, these have been around forever. So a lot of the time it's, when you're seeing all these different innovations coming out, is this is this potentially too good to be true? Is this greenwashing? Or does it make sense? And if it makes sense, if it sits right, the reality of it is it probably is the best choice for yourself and the environment.
Right. So I guess we have to talk about silicone because it's everywhere for kids products, like silicone plates and cups and straws and bowls and you name it. Do you have an opinion on silicone?
As a general rule, we say only purchase it if you're going to reuse it heavily. So otherwise, it really shouldn't be considered a single-use product whatsoever because it won't be recycled at the end of the day.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I found some really cute little stainless steel like plates for Bash at our local farm called the Ecology Center here. And I got a couple of them, but those silicone plates are everywhere for kids. Like I feel like I'm surrounded by, and it's, being marketed, and there are some studies that are showing it's like better than plastic, but if it's degrading with heat and water in a dishwasher, like I kind of worry about that. Is it the same for like your clothes with your dishwasher and plastic?
Exactly. So the reality of it is there's very little studies that are funded by these companies that look at the health implications, the human health implications of this. And this is all, we're just starting to kind of unveil the reality behind it. But from what we're seeing right now with the science, it is just as harmful.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, Leah, I feel really inspired. Again. It's interesting. It's, when it comes to food, nutrition, blood sugar balance, I'm constantly reading those studies and staying up on the information that's coming out of PubMed and seeing clients and seeing changes in their, blood tests, A1C. And so that's super motivating for me. And I feel like you are equally motivated in the space of ocean health and plastics and recycling and greenwashing and in the way that I hope that I'm influencing and motivating my community. I hope, I feel so motivated by you to make some changes, and I hope that my audience does as well. They're probably like, but she's not going to cut out seafood. I'm going to try, guys. No, I'm going to do my part, rinsing out and drying my plastic single-use containers if they are recyclable. But the ultimate goal is to go package free. So we'll put those links like plain products, raw elements, Ren, package free, made safe, and guppy bags. I mean, you have some great resources. So we'll make sure to put those in the show notes, because the reality is if 94% of us in the United States are drinking microplastics in our water, we have to make changes so that we don't see it implicate our health for the long run. And that's just, that's obviously scary. So thank you so much for being here. Where can people follow along? Where can they learn more? Do you have any final thoughts for how we can support Mother Earth?
So first, thank you so much for having this conversation. I also love the connection between the ocean and wellness. And actually, we just launched a year-long campaign around the intersection between ocean and wellness, and really needing internal healing to be able to actually take care of the ocean, the planet, the environment, and how those are intrinsically connected. So yeah, just as a complete side note there, that's something that we're also really pursuing heavily there. And then in terms of being able to find out more information, so our website is oceanic.global. Our work with businesses and industries is thebluestandard.com. Actually, on the Blue Standard, there is something called the Blue List, which is a list of over 300 sustainable vendors to traditionally harmful products. So you can go and check that out. And that's also a great resource. And then we also have a lot of different educational resources on our website, on our Instagram, oceanic.global. And yeah, very excited to be having this conversation around, Earth Day and Earth Week.
I love everything that you've shared, and I'm on the bluestandard.com. And just for people who have their own companies, it looks like you have plastic-free verification and consumer goods packaging information where people can probably if you are starting a business, I mean, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole there today to see what I can even do with my products. This is a great resource for everyone. So bluestandard.com by Oceanic Global. It's great.
Thank you. No, excited to work with anyone that's interested in shifting over there. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time, Leah. I really appreciate it. And we will put all these links in the show notes so people can pull the plastics out of their life and out of your washing machine.
Sounds great. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.